This is Jackson Kerr, and I want to welcome you to Prophetic Keys, helping you to understand today's issues through the prophetic realm, through God's eyes. Now, today, I want to talk about one of the things that I've begun to notice. One of the things I've noticed about media today is that we don't often see original plots in books and films anymore. We see the same thing rehashed over and over. By this I mean we don't see a lot of new things being written and produced. For instance, how many heist films, how many heist movies can you name? How about back-to-school films? There's a period called the Disney Renaissance that went from 1989 to 1999 when the studio created new content with original songs and scripts that are based on mythology and old stories. This is what everyone usually associates with Disney. There are many times when people, friends of mine and stuff, have talked about Disney films and how much they love them, and these were firmly established in their childhood, and these are from that set of films. So everyone noticed when a few years ago Disney began remaking their films instead of coming out with original material. Now they've brought out other franchises, they've bought out other franchises, but we don't see totally original material being produced as often as we expect from studios. This trend of remaking films or books instead of writing original scripts goes back further than you'd think. Do you want to take a guess how far back? In 1996, Disney produced their first live-action film, 101 Dalmatians. It was a remake of their 1961 film of the same title, based on the 1956 novel by Dodie Smith, The 101 Dalmatians. Yes, the unoriginal plot, though, translating to a fun movie for families, was used in 61 for the Disney film. Unoriginal meaning it's borrowed from a book, not that it's not an interesting film. But the plot grabbing goes back further than this. If you were starting up a film studio, you'd certainly think carefully about the choice of your first film, right? Putting together a good team is important, but if the premise of your film is great, if it's not great, if it's not fantastic, that could hold down the production. It could hold it back. Notice that the first film that Disney Productions put out ever was Treasure Island in 1950, based on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel. It's a classic book, don't get me wrong, but why did they pick Treasure Island? One of the first things that comes to mind is that by choosing something like this was the studio's way of saying that we're producing films for families. The studio didn't bank on showing off the talent of their top writers, but on adapting an old story to something which could be used for film. This caught my attention when I read it because one of the first things I try to pay attention to in film is writing, and writing includes the choice of the premise of the film, what story you're going to tell, or how you're going to tell the story. If you want to show off the skills of your best writers for a brand new studio, why would you choose an existing story? Why not let your writers show off their abilities? Maybe the studio's goal was not to give their writers opportunities, but to establish Disney as a family-friendly, trustworthy studio. After all, if you trust the studio, you'll watch just about anything they produce, right? So one thing which frustrates me about film is that we are seeing the same plots used over and over in the movies produced today. Now we see genres like the buddy comedy and action-adventure films. The executives behind the film industry are telling you the same stories with different actors and settings. Films fit pretty well into these genres. But when was the last time we saw something groundbreaking, something that pushed into a new kind of storytelling? A lot of people talk about groundbreaking special effects if you listen to interviews, but what about groundbreaking stories? See if you can identify what movie I'm talking about here. A youth is stuck at home and danger invades. The youth leaves home and runs into new friends, living a new dangerous lifestyle. The youth makes a choice to live as their new-found friends do, committing himself to their cause. They enter a place of danger. The youth obtains something of value before they all escape. Then the enemy finds them where they are, and there is some final conflict where the enemy is set back or destroyed. Now, if you haven't already, pause the video and figure out what movie I'm talking about. Do you have it in mind? So what was your answer? I was thinking of Star Wars when I wrote this synopsis, but the same plot could pretty much be applied to The Lord of the Rings. I'm sure it could be applied to many other films as well. This plot, the hero's journey in layman's terms, is just one of many plot types. Let me know in the comments if there was a film you thought of when I mentioned this. This shows just what I'm talking about. We see 1,000 renditions of the same stories. The heist film, the alien film, the romance, the rom-com, the list goes on and on. There's a deliberate use across the board, using the same plots, the same jokes, because they are easy to write, easily recognizable, and the studios can use them to keep churning out films. Introducing outrageous ideas in a film is not difficult with a large cast of characters and with the film lasting for about 2 hours nowadays. All it takes is a quick scene. If you wanted to slip it in there, it wouldn't be that hard. It might be a passing 90 seconds in a side scene, or it could be in the middle of the action. There's a principle that if a public person, someone who's on film a lot or goes about a lot or is seen by many people, if a public person or group involves themselves in something long enough and deep enough, eventually something is going to leak to the public. Research historic government leaks if you need evidence of this. Someone catches wind of it or someone lets something slip and the public begins to learn the truth. It's through careful observation, reading, and listening that we will begin to see the truth. Our culture, unfortunately, has been slowly moving away from our biblical foundations on which America's Constitution was founded. During heated debate concerning how to set up the government in relation to each state, argument turned to a heated debate, arguments, and shouting. According to notes written by William Steele, Benjamin Franklin spoke up and called for prayer and consideration of the matter. He quotes in a writing, "I suggest, Mr. President," Franklin said, "that the propriety of nominating and appointing, before we separate, a chaplain," this is a minister, "to this convention, whose duty it shall be uniformly to assemble with us and introduce the business of each day by an address to the Creator of the universe and the Governor of all nations, beseeching him to preside in our council and enlighten our minds with a portion of heavenly wisdom, influence our hearts with a love of truth and justice, and crown our labors with complete and abundant success." William Steele goes on to say that, quote, "The motion for appointing a chaplain was instantly seconded and carried. The motion for an adjournment was then put and carried unanimously, and the convention adjourned accordingly. The 3 days of recess were spent in the manner advised by Dr. Franklin. The opposite parties mixed with each other, and a free and frank interchange of sentiments took place. On the 4th day we assembled again, and if great additional light had not been thrown on the subject, every unfriendly feeling had been expelled, and a spirit of consolation had been cultivated, which promised, at least, a calm and dispassionate reconsideration of the subject." This type of calm discussion recalled by Steele is hardly something you'll hear encouraged by the media or political realm now. But it's vitally important if we want to get to the truth. We need to stay clear-headed and ask some questions about what's going on. Are the big news sources saying the same thing they said 2 weeks ago? Did the big news media tell the same story 4 months ago or longer? Or are they flip-flopping to find the right angle to provoke a reaction from the public? Scripture talks about this kind of behavior in Proverbs 6:12-9. "A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech, winks with his eyes, signals with his feet, points with his finger, with perverted heart desires evil, continually sowing discord. Therefore calamity will come upon him suddenly. In a moment he will be broken beyond healing. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, 7 which are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. We need to be aware of what's going on and to keep our eyes open as we watch the media. This is not a time for fear. This is a time to be rooted in truth and be strengthened in the Lord. James 1 talks about doubt and how to handle this. Verses 6 through 8. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. We need to remember that God is our anchor, and that He is what we hold to, not our favorite pastimes, but the Lord and His Word, His promises for us and our families. If we try to hold ourselves to anything else, we will find ourselves living in fear, because this worldly system offers no security that we can hold to forever. This is to contrast the living in the hope that God gives us. Matthew 7:24-27 tells us, Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Every day we see trailers, commercials, and stories from companies who have been established for many years. But as this scripture points out, on what foundation you build your life as well as your venture is critical to how it will succeed. As we seek out the truth, we need to be sure that we are also seeking after the Father's heart. When we do so, we can see the situation through His eyes and have a greater understanding of what is going on in our nation today. I pray that the Lord will continue to open our eyes, and that He will bless you wherever you are, and that He will reveal His truth to you as we move forward in this time of shaking in our nation. I'm Jackson Kerr. Thank you very much.